Let's settle this rent versus buy debate once and for all.
What tax deductions?
Owning is always better.
A recent study said that renting is cheaper than buying, but is that the full picture? Okay, so we watched every video of Ramit and Dave's channel, all about renting and buying. And so I've summarized each of their arguments for you into 3 points. Oh, and at the end, I'm gonna give you the one question you must ask yourself before you should buy a home. All right, so let's start with Ramit's standpoint on this, right? He loves renting. Why? Because it's financially flexible. Renting allows you more liquidity, less financial commitment. Sometimes it can be cheaper, not always, right? But this flexibility really enables individuals to invest the difference between renting and the higher cost of homeownership into potentially higher yielding investments. So with whatever you might save, because there's a lot of hidden costs when it comes to owning a home. I know, I've dealt with these costs. For example, owning a home comes with things like maintenance, repairs, there's property taxes and insurance. Although you can have renter's insurance with renting, still, the insurance of homeowner's insurance can be much higher, and that can significantly erode the financial benefits of having homeownership, where renters avoid these unpredictable expenses and so forth. Myself, for example, I own a house. We spent over $100,000 last year repairing a basement that flooded, so that wasn't fun. But that had to come out of our pocket, where if we were renting, we wouldn't have to do it. Now, he also points out that there's some market volatility involved when it comes to homeownership. He points out that the real estate market can fluctuate and that there's no guarantee that a home value will always increase, which is true. Renters are not directly affected by market downturns in the value of a property, and therefore avoiding their potential financial loss. Now, on the other hand, you got Dave's argument, right? His standpoint says that you should be owning a home. He says that the rental market tends to balance itself out over time due to supply and demand. So if rental prices are significantly higher than mortgage payments, investors will increase the supply of rental properties, which then eventually lowers rent prices or increases home values, making buying more financially sensible, right? Because the truth is, if prices go up, rent goes up, right? Where your payment may not. Now, there's also other homeownership advantages. Long term, Dave Ramsey believes that owning a home is one of the best financial strategies for wealth building. Owning a home can also be more costly in the short term due to maintenance and repairs, but in the long run, it still provides financial stability and the potential for equity growth. He also further points out that, you got to be financially responsible when you do this. You got to be ready to buy the home, have the money for the down payment, make sure you have a strong foundation. This means trying to be debt-free, have an emergency fund. He wants to make sure that your mortgage payment is no more than a quarter of your take-home pay, and that's on a 15-year fixed mortgage, which I'm not a big fan of recommending people do. And so he says, if you can do this, if you can make this all work financially, then it becomes a blessing rather than a burden. So the one question you got to ask is this: are you, and I'm saying this to you, am I financially and emotionally prepared for the long-term commitment and responsibilities of homeownership? And really, does that align with my personal and financial goals? And here's the thing: I think they're both right. I think Ramit has got a great point about renting. In fact, I have several multimillionaire friends that actually rent right now. Why? Because they realize that, one, they just don't want to have to maintain the property. They may also want flexibility. They might want to have the ability to say, this is somewhere I'm going to be temporarily. I don't have to feel like I'm stuck here because I own it, and maybe or maybe not can I sell it. With renting, at least you have a little bit more flexibility. You could say at some point, you know what, I'm moving. I can be more mobile. I can go somewhere else. In fact, when I first married my wife, we went to California for a few months. We were just renting for a few years, just trying to establish where we were going to kind of set roots before we went and bought our home. So renting can be good. And I'll tell you, again, from the standpoint of saving money and saving on costs, yes, the rent can actually be higher than what it costs to buy, depending on where you live. But the truth is, when it comes to those maintenance and repairs and things like that, this is where you realize that Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, when he says that owning a home is not an asset, he's correct. If it's not paying you, it's not really an asset. Now, on the flip side, Dave Ramsey does say there's that potential for equity growth. Now, Ramit said that there could be financial crashes. That's not as common, right? That did happen in the last Great Recession, but out of the previous 6 recessions, that's the only time values went down. And really in the last 100 plus years, only twice have real estate values dropped during recessions or depressions. So it's very, very rare. It can happen, but it's so much more rare. When I know Ramit Sethi say, hey, go in and invest in the stock market, I'm telling you, the stock market has a lot more chance of going down than your real estate property does. So there's an argument for ownership as well, because although it can be more expensive, short term and even long term, Dave Ramsey is right. The truth is, when you see people that are renters, like chronic renters versus those that are chronic home buyers, It sounds like a disease, I know. I'm not trying to make it sound nasty, but those that do this long-term strategy, those that are renters tend to not have as much net worth. They tend to have not as many assets as a result. Or those that own a home, sometimes their biggest asset becomes their home. And if they end up selling it, getting the equity out, they could go buy a new property, be completely essentially rent-free, right? Or even better, that money can be taken out and used to go and buy other assets that can actually accelerate them towards their goals. So again, there's an argument to be made for both, and I've done both. And I think there's a time and a season for either one. There's a situation for either one. Overall, I probably would lean a little bit more towards Ramsey in owning a property, but I will say this, it's not as glorious as people make it out to be, right? Yes, it can long-term get you to build more assets and essentially have more money you could be using to invest and have more money come back in cash flow. But again, don't ever discount the value of renting too. That renting, depending on the area you live in, sometimes renting can be cheaper than even owning the property. And that's an advantage. Again, I'm gonna flip over to homeownership though. The one thing nice about homeownership is if you buy it with a mortgage, that payment usually, assuming you're not refinancing, remains the same, right? You get to keep the same payment. Yes, you might have a little bit of taxes, insurance costs go up, but for the most part, it stays the same. Where with renting, they can raise that rent on you whenever they want. And on average, nationwide, rents go up about 4% a year. So you start to see that over the long term, it's just not as fun, right? It's just not as fun to have that long term. But again, I think you should do it based on what kind of lifestyle you want to live. What's the kind of life you want? If you want to be more mobile, more flexible, I would pick renting. If you want to have more assets, you want to be able to grow wealth more, I would go more with homeownership. So that's my standpoint on it. So what are your thoughts? What do you think is better, renting or buying? I'd love to hear your comments and your thoughts in the comment section below. In the meantime, hey, if you like this one, check out this other one about Dave Ramsey where my personal friend actually got attacked by Dave Ramsey on the air. See what my reaction is to that.